Heavenly Father, thank you so much, Lord, for being so merciful to us. And thank you for giving us, opening our eyes, especially me and Sister Susan and everybody. We are here to help each other, Lord, and in any possible way. And it is a blessing to be corrected because it's an opportunity to learn and to grow. And I thank you so much, Lord. I pray for each of us today. And I just give you all the blessings for this wonderful little study that we're going to do, A.T. Jones document. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah, so Susan can't. So, and I know I have this document open. I just got to find it on here. There we go. It's only 7 pages, and we'll probably talk a little bit about what we were talking about Sabbath with Acts 27 and those where the 2 C's met. We might try to touch on that. Okay, so I'll read a little bit. We'll pass it around and take turns reading it. And just a refresher of what we've been looking at is that third structure. The 3 structures. You have the structure of Adventism, God's people, the structure of the counterfeit, which is the papacy, and the structure of the In God We Trust, which is the Protestant line. And knowing that they're in those 3 structures, there are 3 histories. The first 2 are failure, and the final one is a history of success. Mm-hmm. And we know that those histories did not equally align in the first 2 histories of failure. But in the last history, they all seem to be coming into alignment to have their success at the same time, meaning the battle's ready, as far as I can understand that. The battle's ready to go head to head because they're all in place at the same time. In the structure of Protestantism, we know that there is, and on Wednesday night, I'm going to do her notes on identifying the threat. So we know that on the Protestant line, that they were identified a threat in each of the histories, and the threat is different in each history. And when the threat is different, then the response is different. And the threat, and then we've gone back and looked at the Covenanters and read some of A.T. Jones' documents as well on that, and the National Reform Association, where he lays out that the National Reform Association, the National Reformers are the Covenanters, are the Reformed Presbyterian Church. We've learned that that's the conservative stream, a very conservative stream of Protestantism. It's not mainstream Protestantism, and it's not liberal Protestantism. It's a very extreme conservative side. And that conservative side is the one that are the nationalists and the white Christians. They sought in the first history to make an amendment to the Constitution. In the 1888 history, and in the 40s and 50s, hey guys, stop. I'm not saying they're starting to work towards interpreting. I'm losing the words on how to say, but by the time you get to our current history, they're just flat out interpreting. It's kind of a progressive thing from let's amend the Constitution to eventually to this history. We don't need to amend it because we're already a Christian nation, and everybody knows that, so to speak. So we've covered some of these documents that have shown some of that progress, where A.T. Jones takes the Covenanters and takes it all the way back to the 1600s. And that's prior to them even, some of those people that it was prior to them even being in the United States, where they started to split right in the heart of the Reformation, and where John Knox takes Calvinism back to Scotland, and that's where the National Reformers, or the National Reformed Church, the Covenanters, come out of. So now what we've been doing is tracing that stream all the way into our history and who it is that's doing the work that they're doing. And what we read last week in the American papacy shows kind of a, from what I got out of it, what we all got out of it, I think David was there too, so he probably remembers this, that what I got out of it is that the reformers actually need the Catholics. The Catholics say the reformers need the Catholics, and they're going to come to a certain point where they all come together when it comes to the Constitution and this nation being a Christian. The Protestants will actually seek the help of the Catholics, and the Catholics, according to the quotes and things that we read, the Catholics aren't involved in any of this work. They're just waiting because they know where it's going. But they also say that when the United States does that, that will be the undoing of the United States when they join hands and seek the help of the Catholics in this matter. So what we also have is within the Catholic Church, just like we have within Adventism, just like what we have in the world, we have the separation between the conservative and the liberal side. So you've got these extreme, the conservative Catholics and then the liberal Catholics, and I don't know how that's all going to play out at this time. But what we saw from A.T. Jones' document, if that's going to be the way that it progresses, that the United States, they're undoing. So that's something that we still need to continue to study and as light opens up. But we're just looking at what his document laid out. So that's where we are from there. I hope that was a good review. Any questions? Okay. So this one is National Reform and the Rights of Conscience. The avowed purpose of the National Reform Party is to secure an amendment to the Constitution of the United States. This is 1889. That's what we've been reading. A lot of the documents, the American papacy was 1889 as well. So this is in that history when they were trying to change the amendment, and it was just a couple years after this. They wanted to make this a Christian establish this as a Christian nation. Oh, and the reason that they want to establish it as they want to specify a Protestant Christian nation to totally distinguish it separate from the Catholics. And they believe that Jesus is the king of the world, the king of the earth, and that he's the king of everybody, and that everybody has to follow Jesus according to their teachings of who Jesus is. That's a poor paraphrase, but so the avowed purpose of the National Reform Party is to secure the amendment to the Constitution of the United States, by which every man shall be compelled to acknowledge that God is sovereign, that Christ is ruler, and that the Bible is the supreme law. Whether a man believes it or not is no difference. He must be compelled to acknowledge it because they profess to believe it. And that's the Christian Statesman, October 2. That was their publication in the Christian Statesman, if I remember right. Maybe David remembers. I think that's the Christian Statesman. That was their document, right? I should know that. Let's see. So give all men to understand. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying I couldn't get the right button. I was taking a screenshot there and I couldn't get back. And I don't really actually remember that.
The Christian State. I'm pretty sure it was their document, but when I'm reading it, the avowed purpose of the National Reform Party is to secure the amendment to the Constitution of the United States, by which every man, I have to verify it. We can try to verify it later. I'm pretty sure that was their document, and he goes through them. The titles, like I get so many in my head and I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure that was their document. So, okay, the Christian Statesman says, give all men to understand that this is a Christian nation. Yeah, that's them speaking. And believing that without Christianity we perish. We must maintain by all right means our Christian character. Inscribe this character on our Constitution. Enforce upon all that come among the laws of Christian morality. So yeah, the Christian Statesman, that's their saying. So the above paragraph, I was reading it backwards, is A.T. Jones talking, and then he's going to reference the Christians. You guys probably followed that, but I got it backwards. So the first paragraph was actually A.T. Jones telling us and preparing us to hear what the Christian Statesman says, and that's what this next paragraph is. So by force, it should be enforced upon all. And where do we know who else forced a form of religion on all? And that was the papacy, right? So enforce, according to Webster,
Yes.
go ahead. Somebody gonna say
I
something?
just said yes.
Oh, okay.
No,
Boy.
I get a big delay compared to you guys.
You what?
I have a big delay when it comes to these compared to what you guys are doing. I don't know why.
I know different
It's
people.
probably
Yeah, sorry.
it's probably an Arkansas thing.
It happens in other places as well. So it just kind of depends. So, okay. Enforce, according to Webster, is to force, to constrain, to compel, to execute with vigor. Therefore, the proposition of these national reformers is to force, to compel all to keep the laws of Christian morality, to execute with vigor upon all the laws of Christian morality. And it's really interesting because you compel them on the laws of Christian morality, and who are the worst in Christian morality? I know there's a lot, but that far right side, in our day at least, is horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ellen White says that to force is of Satan. It's satanic.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and what is to be the penalty for dissent? So if you don't go along with it, what's the penalty? And we already read that before, that it would be death. Well, they pretend to be so kind that they will not whip anybody for it. They pretend to be so liberal that they will not impose a fine upon anyone for it. They pretend to be so merciful that they will not imprison anyone for it. But they are neither so kind, so liberal, nor so merciful, but that they will disfranchise everyone who will not acknowledge and submit to the provisions which they choose to embody in their religious amendment to the Constitution. You gotta stop that. Hey there, you gotta stop that. Okay. Thus, for a religious opinion, however conscientiously held, which may disagree with theirs, they deliberately propose to deprive men of their birthright to the most inestimable right of earth, that for which thousands upon thousands have laid down their lives, that for which our sacred fathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, the right to be a citizen among a free people, and in this instance, a citizen of the best government on the earth. Every honor to which he might otherwise aspire, every right to which he might otherwise be entitled, must be swept away at one stroke, because I'm not sure what that word is, because forsooth, I know there were typos in the last one we read, he chooses to claim the right to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience. That this is no fancy picture that we have drawn, that it is no fable that we have devised in regard to what that party proposes to do. We have abundant proof in their own words. So they of their own words, will propose to force Christianity, their Christian morality, on everyone. And it seems they force their Christian morality on everyone but themselves. In the Christian Statesman of November 1, 1883, Mr. W.J. Coleman, one of the principal exponents of the National Reform religion, replied to some questions that had been put by a correspondent who signed himself Truth Seeker. We copy the following. What effect would the adoption of the Christian Amendment, together with the proposed changes in the Constitution, have upon those who deny that God is sovereign, Christ the ruler, and the Bible the law? This brings up the conscience question at once. The classes who would object are, as Truth Seeker has said, Jews, infidels, atheists, and others. These classes are perfectly satisfied with the Constitution as it is. How would they stand towards it if it recognized the authority of our Lord Jesus Christ? To be perfectly plain, I believe that the existence of a Christian constitution would just, it's probably supposed to be disfranchise every logically consistent infidel. Now, if somebody wants to unpack that one, I had trouble with that one. Any comments to that paragraph?
Yeah, he's really just saying that last sentence there, that if we try to make ourselves this Christian nation and force everybody, that means that we're cutting out a whole large swath of the country.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's not logical. It's out of control is what it is.
Yeah. And what we
I mean,
saw in the, there was another point I was going to make on the one we read last week, the American papacy, if you remember, because I know you and Kathy were here. I don't think Donna was here when we did. She might have been. That they talked about how, I don't remember the exact words, but I remember talking about those that are ill-informed in the United States are going to go along with this. And I started thinking about the two streams of information and how all the conspiracy theories and everything else, all the things that have corrupted the minds of people to where they don't know what's going on, and that they're ill-informed. So ill-informed people are going to go along with this and not know what they're doing.
Yeah.
There we have in plain words what they propose to do with dissenters under their Christian constitution. But let us look into this a little further. Notice it is only the logically consistent dissenter that will be disenfranchised. The logically consistent dissenter. By the same token, then the logically inconsistent can all be citizens. That is, the man of honest intention, of firm conviction, and of real principle, who values his principles more than he does political preference, he must be disenfranchised. While the time servers, the political hacks, the men who of no conviction and no principle, they can all be acceptable citizens. That's interesting because it kind of ties right into what I was just saying almost. If maybe you guys understand that too, that you kind of got this group that that's the group that's going to go along with it.
Yeah.
Is that what you get out of that?
Yep.
Yeah, because there's going to be these ones that these time servers are just going to go along with it. They can all be acceptable citizens. In other words, the honest man, if he be a dissenter, cannot be a citizen, but every hypocrite can be a citizen. They be uneducated or ill-informed and just go with whatever. Therefore, the inevitable logic of the national reform position is to put a premium upon hypocrisy. And such will be the value of citizenship under their so-called Christian constitution. The inevitable logic of the national reform position is to put a premium upon hypocrisy. Such a result from such proceedings is not new. The Puritan Parliament solemnly resolved that no person shall be employed, but such as the house shall be satisfied of his real godliness. And as the natural consequence, the realm was filled with hypocritical piety. I'm having trouble following some of these. The Puritan Parliament solemnly resolved that no person shall be employed, but such as the house shall be satisfied of his real godliness. Okay, so there's a religious test question, correct?
Yeah, as long as he wears his tie and he sits there quietly and brings his Bible and pays his tithe and doesn't make waves, he can think whatever he wants to think. But on the outward, it looks like he's really right in line. It's interesting, the house, HOUSC, that's, I'm imagining the leadership there, the church leaders.
No, it's the house of the,
What'd she say?
I'm just thinking that well, I was distracted in previous paragraphs, but are we not talking about the government here?
You want me to back up?
No,
Well,
no, no.
it's the Puritan government, parliament.
Yeah, it's saying that what they're doing now is not a new thing, and then comparing it to the Puritan Parliament that was solemnly resolved. that-
Okay, so it's a Puritan Parliament's house, but still the Puritan Parliament,
They're-
isn't that a government?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
So when I see such as the house, that's to me part of this Puritan government.
yeah, I think,
Is
yeah,
gonna look upon this. They don't care what the inside are doing.
yeah.
They see the outside. And they're okay. But as the natural consequence, the realm was filled with hypocritical piety.
Okay.
So, am I making sense? I see it, yeah, I guess like David's saying, this person, as long as he or she shows up, dressed in their Sunday best and, do all the outward, like, Aaron said, the whited sepulchres that look good from the outside, the dishes clean on the outside, but filthy on the inside. Am I seeing that? Am I making sense?
Yeah, and they're
Can
calling
you-
it, they're saying that the house should be satisfied with his real piety. His real God,
Yeah,
his real godliness.
yeah.
But it's not real godliness.
But it's not real godliness. That's why it says then the whole realm is filled with hypocritical piety.
Hypocritical piety, yeah, that's right, because yeah.
So they're satisfied that it's real godliness when it just makes nothing up but a crowd of hypocrites. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it's not so much our purpose in this place to notice the logic of their position as it is to show their avowed purpose of outraging every principle of the rights of conscience. Mr. Coleman is not alone in thus defining the status of dissenters. In the Statesman of February 21, 1884, Mr. J.C.K. Milligan, in writing upon the same subject, expressed himself thus: "The worst result will be to disenfranchise them. But this is not the worst result which they wish, nor which they intend. Read carefully the following extract from an address delivered by Reverend E.B. Graham at a National Reform Convention held at York, Nebraska, and reported in the Christian Statesman of May 21st, 1885. We might add, in all justice, if the opponents of the Bible do not like our government and its Christian features, let them go to some wild, desolate land, and in the name of the devil, and for the sake of the devil, subdue it, and set up a government of their own on infidel and atheistic ideas. And then if they can stand it, stay there till they die." Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's what we found in the American Statesman too, is that they distinguish themselves and everyone else is this atheistic government system of government, and political atheism, I think was the term. political atheism. So you're either like them, with them, whether you're aware of what they're doing and who they are. You might be just sitting in there and going along with everything like they show and showing your real godliness, and you're all fine and well, but you're filled with hypocrisy. Or you're against them. And if you're against them, even if you're a Christian, you're against them because you stand for the rights of conscience. You're an infidel and you're an atheist. You have atheistic ideas. Because in their eyes, you're not allowed to call yourself a Christian and not agree with them. That's how I kind of take that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
It just sounds like Muslim theology, you know. I mean, it hasn't really changed that mindset amongst the conservatives, you know. And it just
Yeah.
seems like it hasn't really changed the mindset of these Christian conservatives.
No, we saw that when we were reading.
They cannot, these Christian conservatives, they cannot ever talk about the Muslims and, you know, Sharia law and all that. They really can't, because if they had the opportunity, they would do the same thing.
They're getting their opportunity. They're almost there.
Yeah.
And that's what we've seen in the multiple documents that we've read when it comes to
They do it in a more subtle way, you know, but
yeah, well, people don't know. But when you
Yeah.
read statements like that, it's like not
Oh,
so
yeah.
subtle. Come here.
but not too many people read statements like these, you know.
No, they don't. And we needed to be reviewing all these national reform documents years ago. So that is pretty heavy, but there is one more step that could be taken, and it is taken. Reverend Jonathan Edwards says, Jonathan Edwards says, tolerate atheism, sir? There's nothing out of hell that I would not tolerate as soon. Wow. The true inwardness of this last can be more readily appreciated when it is understood that this reverend gentleman defines atheism to be whatever opposes, that's basically, I think, what I just said, anything that opposes them. I haven't read this document, by the way, so I'm kind of, praise the Lord, I got it.
Yeah.
So whatever opposes national reform to them is atheism. For this is what A.T. Jones is saying. For in the same speech, he distinctly names atheists, deists, Jews, Seventh-day Baptists. Besides using the general term, our objectors, he declares that the atheist does not believe in the soul, and says of all, these are all for the occasion, and so far as our amendment is concerned, one class. They use the same arguments, the same tactics against us. They must be named from him, the atheist. They must be treated as, for this question, one party. And I'm going to ask if somebody else wants to read for just a second while I run her outside.
I can read.
Okay.
So then, under a national reform regime, dissenters must not only be disfranchised, but they must all be sent to the devil, and that too in some wild and desolate land. And even that is not enough, but they must stay there till they die. Harsh words. And that is the national reform idea of justice. That is the kind of government that they propose under their Christian constitution. How can this even be called Christian? That is the way in which they propose to convert men to the Christian religion. Wow. Well, I don't even, this is beyond force. This is just pure cruelty.
Yeah.
Wow.
I missed part of that sentence, part of that paragraph that just jumped in on the end of it. Stay there till you die. Yeah, it was the previous, from the previous.
Yeah. Stay there till you die.
Yeah. And go, what did he say that it was a wild and desolate land? Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Why? I mean, why do you even need to go to hell? You know, um, they're giving the punishment right here.
You know, it's so amazing what we see today. I think about it because I see it in this document here too. How? I mean, I know we've had a lot of things wrong, but it never seemed right to hate. And yet you see so many people out there calling themselves Christian, and their hearts are so filled with hate. They don't realize it. I guess because of the conditioning. That makes me really think about that. The conditioning of society that this is a Christian nation. So those would be the ones. I kind of picture it where I was at before, and I picture it with my family, that they think this is a Christian nation, and they actually have the mindset. I can actually identify that in my family. None of them go to church, but they'll all say that, that this nation is a Christian nation, and we need to go by what God says. And nobody knows what God says, and nobody cares what God says, because somebody's just going to tell you what he says, and it's all okay. And what they're telling you that it is that it's a white Christian nation, and none of these others are allowed to be here. It's like, why don't you guys just think about that?
Yeah, but the thing is, they just don't have any clue what real Christianity is all about. I mean, to be Christians, you are followers of Christ. So when you look at that, rather than forcing anybody to believe what Jesus said, he's the one who died for the non-believers.
Yeah.
That's being a Christian.
I think that with or without even the Bible, Parmender's talked about it too, that you can be a good person and care about people and love people. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to know God to be a good, decent person. It's just common sense to be kind to one another. And these people have such a mindset that it is spilled over, the ill-informed. I'm thinking of my family just before my eyes as we're talking about this, kind of like it's all being put into place where I used to be, and where I know they are, that it's ill-informed people. They're going along with it.
Yeah, it's very sad. All right. That is the way in which they propose to exemplify the sublime Christian principle of brotherly love, and the means which they will employ that brotherly love may continue. What brotherly love?
Wow.
My way or the highway. That's the brotherly love.
That's brotherly love. Yeah. To them.
Yeah. That is the way in which they are going to bring about the reign of universal peace, even as they say the millennium itself. That will be indeed the reign of the saints.
Oh, they'll be just waiting to see us all burn in the lake of fire.
Yeah.
Anxious to see it. Whereas God is raising up a people and preparing them to weep and sorrow over these very people having to go into that lake of fire.
Wow. By a like scheme of the Christian endeavor of the Society of Jesus, that's the Jesuits, there was peace once in the fair Waldensian valleys. By like exertions, Innocent III succeeded in creating peace amidst the graceful scenery, the rich fields, and the splendid cities of Languedoc and Provence.
We may have to look that up another time. That's why I like Susan's here. She's quick on, I don't know if anybody else is, but she's always quick on looking up things. Because I think there's a sarcasm going on there, isn't there? by a like scheme of the Christian endeavor of the Society of Jesus, there was peace once in the fair Waldensian valleys. Because the Society of Jesus, they weren't too nice to the Waldensians, right?
No, yeah, we actually visited a site when we went to France a few years back, where the Waldensians once were and where there were no more because they
Yeah,
all got
yeah.
wiped out.
Yeah. So by like excursions, Innocent III succeeded in creating peace amidst the graceful scenery. Check that out.
Yeah, I think that's just saying that, since they wiped out all the dissenters, now there's peace.
Right, right.
Yeah,
That's the way you get peace. Because he kind of just said that up here. That's how they get universal peace.
yeah. You wipe out everybody who doesn't believe like or think like you,
And then you have
then
peace.
then you have peace.
Wow.
Wow, yeah.
This is another good document.
Yeah, this is. And yet, by resolution in National Convention, they gravely assure the world that the religious amendment, instead of infringing on any individual's rights of conscience, will form the strongest safeguard of both the civil and religious liberties of all citizens.
So it's not going to infringe on your rights. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
And you can go back to sleep or stay asleep. We're just telling you don't worry about it because it's not going to infringe on your rights. But you're going to wake up all of a sudden and realize something was wrong.
but the liberty which the national reformers propose to guarantee to every man is the liberty to do as they say, and the liberty to conform to what they shall establish as Christianity and morality. And that is a kind of liberty that is strictly compatible with absolute tyranny. Such liberty as that, the papacy at the height of its power was willing and anxious to grant. Indeed, of that kind of liberty, the Inquisition was the best conservator the world has ever seen.
Wow. Really interesting when you think about all the wars throughout history and the wars that are all fought, because this is like a spiritual battle, but it's, well, not necessarily, I don't mean spiritual like natural spiritual, but I mean, this is a religious battle, I'd say. And they use it to go to war and kill people. So you've got wars that they fight over countries and such. And the idea is to just annihilate your enemy so you can have peace. And they're doing no different. You annihilate your enemy, therefore, then you can have peace.
Yeah. Wow. More than this, they declare themselves to be the conscience party. Dr. Edwards, so they'll be our conscience. Dr. Edwards, in the speech previously referred to, exclaimed, "We are the conscience party, the free conscience party. Their purpose to disfranchise and deliver to the devil in some wild, desolate land, etc., all who do not assent to the national reform ideas of government is to be carried out altogether in behalf of liberty of conscience. That is, the conscience of the national reformers. They give us clearly to understand that it is entirely out of respect to their own conscience that they propose to do all these things." Mr. Coleman says further, in the place before quoted, "If there be any Christian who objects to the proposed amendment on the ground that it might touch the conscience of the infidel, it seems to me it would be in order to inquire whether he himself should not have some conscience in this matter." I didn't quite understand that.
So if there be, yeah, me too. If there be any Christian, so you got all these different Christians. If there be any Christian who objects to the proposed amendment of the National Reformers on the ground that it might touch the conscience of the infidel, So you can't be protecting the infidels. It seems to me it would be in order to inquire whether he himself should not have some conscience in this matter. That last part is where I have a hard
Yeah.
time between him. I get it going up right up until that point. So it seems to me, A.T. Jones, it would be done in order. What's being done is it's a Christian who's objecting to the proposed amendment that it might touch the conscience of the infidel. It would, seems to me, it would be in order to inquire whether he himself should not have some conscience in the matter. So the infidel has a conscience? Is that what?
Yeah, this is a hard one, but if I understand this, the way I see this is that any Christian, so anybody else other than the National Reformers, so any other Christian group who are not part of the National Reformers, what if we object, let's say I'm a some Christian who is not a National Reformer, and let's say that you are a National Reformer, but I object to you because it might disturb someone, a non-believer, period, not a Christian, the infidel. So it might disturb their conscience. Then me as an objector has to reevaluate my own conscience because I don't believe the way you believe. That's how I see this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I still have a hard time with it.
So then in this National Reformed Christianity, it is the perfection of consciousness to outrage
Conscience,
some other man's conscience.
yeah, conscientiousness. Would it be different? That's a little bit different than conscience, right?
Oh yeah, conscientiousness, yeah.
In this,
To outrage some other man's conscience. And the reverse of the golden rule becomes to them the law and the prophets. Their chief complaint is that the present Constitution disfranchises them, which is false, and therefore they must have it changed so that it will disfranchise everyone but them.
Did anybody see? I think it's the Brett Kavanaugh. Yeah, the Brett Kavanaugh one that I just saw recently. Did anybody see what he did with the comments that he made about teenagers should not have? I don't want to say this wrong. They get the death penalty and there's no excuse. I'm poorly paraphrasing. You know, if you're a teenager, you did it with a teenager. You know, if you're under the age of 18, there's no mercy, and you can't get any mercy, and you'll get the death penalty. And I don't remember all the details to it. I'm really giving a poor paraphrase, but the point that I was trying to make is what went through my mind when I read that article. That because the other judge, some of the other judges, Sotomayor was one of them, was pointing out, you know, the things that he said during his confirmation hearing, and how, you know, he plainly stated that, you know, if I'm to be accountable for when I was a teenager, the foolish things or whatever he said, you know, what I've done. And yet, I started thinking about Law and Order. That paragraph made me think of Law and Order. Their idea of Law and Order is this Christian morality that they use the Bible to enforce. And that they are the party of law and order, and they're not the party of grace, you know.
Yes, that's what that's what President Trump was all about.
Yep.
Party of law and order.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty sad.
Okay.
So they want to disenfranchise everyone else,
Right.
and that's their golden rule.
Therefore, all things whatsoever ye would not that men should do to you, This do ye even unto them. For this is the law of, okay, this is the law of national reform. All things, therefore, all things whatsoever ye would not that men should do to you, this do ye even unto them.
That's a reverse golden rule. And that's what it
Yes,
says up above. That's a reverse golden rule. So the golden
yes.
rule is do to others as you would want them to do to you. And he's saying, how did he say that? Do to them, let's see, whatsoever ye would not, that what you don't want men to do, this do to them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
When we read these things and many others like import in the national reform literature and in view of them, express our fears that religious intolerance and persecution will be the inevitable consequence of the success of the national reform movement. They seem to think it passing strange. To them, it seems only folly and fanaticism that anybody should harbor any such fears. Then they come cooing after like a dove, why you need have no fears at all. We would not hurt a hair on your heads, but the sentiments expressed in the above quotations are spoken with too much earnestness and are received with too much favor in the National Reform Conventions for us to allow any weight whatever to such honeyed phrases as, you need have no fears, and we would not hurt a hair on your head.
Yeah, as long as you go along with us.
Well, I guess you wouldn't feel no hurt on your hair when you have no head.
That's true too.
But even if we heard only pleasant words and fair speeches on their part, and had none of these plain and forcible expressions on their real sentiments and feelings, we should be none the less assured that intolerance and persecution would be the result of the success of the National Reform Party. First, because all history proves that such a thing is to be dreaded. And secondly, because such a result is inseparable from the success of such a movement. We repeat.
Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, you were gonna read the next one. It said, sorry, I was thinking you were going back and repeating that one because I was ready to say something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, go ahead.
It's amazing what A.T. Jones knew that we did not understand. The more I read these documents, it's amazing what he knew. And having been in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, never making any of these connections.
Right. Because all of our reactions were to what the papacy was doing.
Right.
So, whatever the papacy did, because we had no foresight. So all we could do is react to what the papacy did. So when papacy did something that remotely looked like a Sunday law, then they became excited. And then when that passed, oh, okay, I guess that's not going to happen. And that pattern continues throughout the time that we were in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. You just looked at what the papacy was doing, and then you react to it. And then when that thing doesn't happen, then you go back to sleep until the next time.
Yeah. And we had all our focus was on the papacy. Our focus was never on Protestantism.
Right. We've never even thought of that.
It should be pretty clear because, I mean, it shows how asleep I was coming into this, because Revelation is pretty clear that there's that first beast and then that second beast. And we somehow turn that second beast, we know it makes an image to the first beast, but we turn that second beast into the first beast as if Protestantism is the saint. I don't know if that's too far extreme to say that, but we don't look at Protestantism.
And the Protestants don't look at Catholicism. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That Catholicism is not even an issue with Protestantism.
I'll be right back again as you continue. I'll be right back.
We repeat, intolerance and persecution are inseparable from the success of such a movement as is represented in the National Reform Association. Their purpose is to place what they decide to be Christian laws, institutions, and usages upon an undeniable legal basis in the fundamental law of the land. Such Christianity thereby becomes the law of the land. And the only point upon which turns the question of persecution or no persecution is, will the law be enforced? If the law shall not be enforced, then their movement will be a failure. For so far as any real practical results are concerned, the whole matter would stand just as it does at present. And the present order of things is the subject of their sorest lamentations. But if the law shall be enforced, then there is persecution, for compulsory conformity to religious opinions is persecution. So, the sum of the matter is this: if the laws which they establish shall not be enforced, their movement will be a failure. If those laws shall be enforced, then there shall be persecution. And that the principles which they advocate will be enforced if they obtain the power is just as certain as that human nature is what it is, or that 2 and 2 makes 4. And who are they that propose to do these things? An association of which the vice presidents alone number 120, than whom we verily believe that there cannot be found in the United States an equal number of other men and women who could exert a more positive influence. In a list given in the Christian Statesman of December 24th, 1885, we find the names of 11 bishops, 16 college presidents, 15 college professors, 3 ex-governors, 7 justices of Supreme Courts, 5 judges of Superior Courts, 2 judges of the United States District Court, 1 judge of the United States Circuit Court, with such a number of Hans,
Are those honorables? I think, is that what that's supposed to be?
honorables,
I think so.
okay. Reverends and doctors,
Yeah.
doctors of divinity, yeah, okay. That we cannot attempt now to count them.
So these he's listing all these ones that are part of this, is if I'm getting that right. List given.
Yes.
To statesmen. Yeah.
And there's more. So
Yeah.
what was an association of which the vice presidents alone number 120? 120.
You see number?
Well, up there it says 120.
Yeah. Association of which.
That's just the vice president.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then who we verily believe that there cannot be found in the United States an equal number of other men and women who could exert a more positive influence. So if I'm following right, he's talking about, these are all people that are supporting this national reform movement. They're exerting a positive influence a wrong positive. Did I read that right?
A more positive influence. So these men and women are exerting the influence for the association, not against.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So these are probably, prominent people.
yeah. Well, look at it. 7 Supreme Court justices,
Right.
judges. That was the honorables, all those judges. Yeah, ex-governors, bishops, college presidents, college professors.
Mm. Let us not be misunderstood. We do not charge that all the eminent men here referred to intend to persecute, nor that they would favor persecution. We freely grant and we really believe that among these there are those who would abhor persecution, but that they would abhor persecution does not help the matter a particle, as long as they, as officers of the association, are doing their very best to establish a system of government and laws under which it will be possible for persecution to be inflicted by those who do not abhor it, but who, on the contrary, are bigoted and fanatical enough to enjoy it.
Yeah, so you got people that are among the association that are I would, it seems you have those that are for it that are also ill-informed too. I mean, they're literally involved in it that are ill-informed. So they kind of hide, or maybe not hide is the right way. It's the end from the beginning is not being seen. Does that make sense?
Yes.
They're not seeing cause and effect.
Right.
Some of them might be going along with these things thinking it's a good thing. I'm thinking about my family again, who never goes to church, never picked up a Bible, but thinking it's all a good thing. These might be some highly educated, obviously there's some credentials in that paragraph, but that really don't seem to see cause to effect. And so
Right.
do you think they're part of it?
I know, and it's hard to see. For example, let's just take the Federalist Society
Mhm.
of all the attorneys and judges and all of them at that level. So like any other association, there's probably some of them who would revel in persecution. And there's probably some of them that abhor persecution, but yet there are all in the Federalist Society, all wanting the same thing. And it's hard, when you're all in the same association, same society, it's hard to look at your friend. So let's say that I myself am not a persecutor, but I believe in morality and, we got to enforce it by law. And maybe I'll do it just short of persecution, but by all means, just short of persecution, I got to, enforce this morality. And you're looking at your friend next door or, next to you and who happens to enjoy persecution. But him being my friend, I'm going to be blind to that fact. Surely he's not going to kill somebody because they don't accept what I say. There's probably that mentality going on too.
Yeah, so what you're describing makes me think of what it seemed like what was going on with when Trump was, in office, and how, in leading up to 2019, it seemed like every single day, can it get any more crazy? Any more obvious to how bad he is, right? And I always viewed those 4 years as like reading in the story of Pharaoh and Moses, when Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, let my people go. I've always kind of seen it in my head that way, let my people go. And the plagues started coming, right? And the plagues would get worse and worse and worse. And slowly, some of those people that were, Egyptians and supporters of all the Egyptian ways, etc., they were starting to say, hey, Pharaoh, this is kind of extreme. So we were it seemed like that's what we were witnessing with when Trump was in office. It's like every day it was like, it wasn't a plague, but that's how I would see it in my head. It's like when the plagues were coming down. So in other words, Trump was allowed to get so extreme, and every day it's like, could it get any worse? Could it get any worse? But then you started to see pop up here and there some Republicans that would stand up against him and up against that faction of the Republican Party and go against their party and break free. So it was like those all that was playing out was tugging at the hearts of people to come out of it, because like you said, they're thinking, surely he's not going to really do that, right? And so they don't really see it, like you said, because hey, he's my friend or he's my neighbor. I don't really notice that it's that bad. But then people started to witness and realize that it would wake up that it really is that bad.
Yes. So, and I'm sure as time goes on, more people will wake up.
Yeah.
Admitting that among these there are men so humane that they would shrink from the enforcement of unjust or oppressive laws, such consideration does not in the least relieve them from the responsibility so long as they persist in doing their utmost to make it possible for the fanatic or the savage to enforce the laws which are put into his hands.
So guilty. Right.
Yeah, they are guilty by association.
Yeah. They're a part of it, unless they stand up and do something about it. And that's what I was kind of seeing, that you can kind of close your eyes to it, or have what do you call it, a blind eye to it, or you can stand up and take a stand and do something and leave it. But these people are a part of it, and they're going to be guilty for being a part of it, even if they aren't part of the persecution.
Right. And I'm sure there'll be some Nicodemuses in there.
Yeah.
George Bancroft truly says, as the humane ever decline to enforce the laws dictated by bigotry, the office devolves on the fanatic or the savage. Hence, the severity of their execution usually surpasses the intention of their authors. Hence, the severity of their execution usually surpasses the intention of their authors.
Okay, wait a second, 'cause I missed part of that. As the humane ever decline to enforce the laws dictated by bigotry, the office devolves on the fanatic or the savage, hence the severity of the execution. So they're going to do worse than whatever the law says. You're going to
Right.
be fanatical, like it says in the paragraph before it. They're going to be fanatical enough to enjoy it, and that pleasure will cause you to go further than what the law even, or the intention is.
Yes. Doubtless, there are men who favor the national reform movement and the enactment of laws embodying its principles, but who would be shocked at such an enforcement of them as is proposed by the Reverend E.B. Graham and the Reverend Jonathan Edwards, D.D., but that does not relieve them of the responsibility. They have no business, much less have they any right to enact such laws. It matters not how humane, nor how eminent for Christian character they may be. They are but playing into the hands of the fanatic and the man of savage disposition. if they so abhor persecution, just let them withhold from such characters as these the power to persecute.
So if they so abhor persecution, they should separate themselves.
Mhm.
Is that what that means?
That if they so abhor persecution, so they hate persecution, just let them withhold from such characters as these the power to persecute. So restrain them from persecuting.
Right.
Yeah. As for us, we are neither Jews, infidels, nor atheists. But as we dissent totally from the doctrines of the National Reform Party, we suppose, of course, that we shall be placed in Dr. Edwards' catalog of atheists. And we are willing to confess that we belong to that fourth class to which Mr. Coleman referred by the phrase, and others. We do not deny that God is sovereign, nor that Christ is ruler, nor that the Bible is the supreme law. We freely confess all these. But while we confess that God is sovereign, we positively deny that he has delegated his sovereignty to the National Reform Party. While we confess that Christ is ruler, we deny that he has chosen the National Reform Party as his confidential advisors in his rule, or that he has appointed that party as his vicegerent in the United States to rule this country in his absence. While we confess that the Bible is the supreme standard of human actions, we deny in toto that the author of the Bible has appointed the National Reform Party to be the infallible interpreters of that book.
And that's who they put themselves in place of. They put themselves in place of Christ, that they are the ones that are interpreting who they call themselves a true church, and they're the ones that carry this out, assigned by Christ to do so. People grow up in that, and then they know no different. And when you find yourself with your knee on the neck of a black man, just doing what seems to come natural.
Yeah. Wow. And now from the plain statements of the National Reform officials themselves, we submit to all candid men that we are justified in saying that the success of the National Reform movement will be the destruction of the dearly bought principle of American liberty, the destruction of the inestimable treasure of American citizenship, and the destruction of every principle of the rights of conscience under the government of the United States. And because of this, we labor for the defense of the genius of American institutions.
So well, this might be judgmental. Just picturing in my mind, Derek Chauvin, when he had his knee on the neck of George Floyd, and the expression on his face with his hand in his pocket, like it's just another day at the office.
Yeah.
You know?
Mhm.
Yeah, his expression on his face tells it all.
It's as if he was in some sort of trance or under some sort of because there were people all around, and it was like he was not in reality. He was somewhere else in his own mind, in his own reality. And he refused to see anything other than that. And that was his demise.
Yeah, it was, going through the trial, or the whole past year leading up to the trial. If it didn't bother your conscience that someone died at your hands to wake you up and to have some sort of remorse that a man died at your hands, there's a problem with your mind.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So the bigoted and fanatical enough to enjoy it. Wow, this was a powerful document.
Yes, it was.
I don't remember if there was one more or if we read them all, but let me pull up real quick and try to find. Read the American Papacy. I'm pretty sure we read the National Reform Church is, maybe it's National Reform is church and state. Maybe we didn't read that one. I don't think we read that one, so we can start that one then. The National Reform, yeah, we didn't read that one because we read National Reform and Absurdity, and then we read the American Papacy, and we just did the Rights of Conscience one. So the other one is National Reform. I'll pull this up and we'll share it. This one's 10 pages. We won't make it all the way through this one, but if everybody's okay with continuing on.
Yeah, let's continue.
Okay. I'm going to send these out in WhatsApp to a few people. That last one was, it's insane that people actually have that mindset. But going back to what we've heard Elder Perminder say, that people on their own, they don't need a Bible to know what's right and wrong. I mean, that's doing wrong and enjoying it.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is National Reform is Church and State. From a somewhat long and careful study, we are fully persuaded that the National Reform movement bears in itself the promise and potency of a union of church and state. And we are fully convinced that if that movement shall succeed, there will be seen in the United States a veritable union of church and state, and the train of evils that inevitably follows such an illicit connection. So like there's some that are just waiting for it all to come to this to where they can have their pleasure in such persecution. And then there's others that are a part of it that don't see the end from the beginning. They don't see cause and effect where what they're doing is leading, but they're just as guilty for being a part of it, because we should be able to see, if I understand that correctly. So it is true that in their conventions, the National Reformers have by resolution affirmed and reaffirmed that in the religious amendment to the national constitution, which they propose, there's no tendency to a union of church and state. For instance, in the Cleveland National Convention, the following resolution was adopted. Resolved that we reaffirm that this religious amendment, instead of infringing on any individual's right of conscience or tending in the least degree to a union of church and state, will afford the fullest security against a corrupting church establishment and form the strongest safeguard of both the civil and religious liberties of all citizens. So that's the National Reform saying that, right? So, but they know what they're doing, because they see, if you remember this, I think this would relate to the presentation that Elder Chess did, how they see view the separation of church and state, that we're all a nation under God. Christ is our king. He's the boss. But the state can't communicate with the boss because there's a separation of church and state. So the boss communicates to the church, and the church communicates to the state what the boss says. How is that not church and state?
Mhm.
That's amazing. So this, however, has no weight against the fact that there is in it a tendency to a union of church and state, because their actions, their speeches, and their writings all contradict the resolution and betray the very tendency which the resolution denies. That such is the case, and that the direct tendency of the National Reform Movement is to unite church and state in the United States. We propose to prove. So they do seek to unite church and state, and he's going to seek to prove that. Mr. W.J. Coleman, a district secretary and one of the chief speakers of the National Reform Convention, in explaining to Truth Seeker must have been a magazine, right? Another article or what do you call it, pamphlet that you would put out, whatever you might call it at that time. Publication, is that the word you would call it? Truth Seeker must be a publication.
Hmm.
Okay, so Mr. W.J. Coleman, a district secretary and one of the chief speakers of the National Reform Convention, in explaining to Truth Seeker the change that will have to be made in the existing Constitution when the proposed amendment shall have been adopted, says, the first sentence of Article of Amendments reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This would be made consistent with the proposed amendment by substituting the words a church for a religion, making it read, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of a church. This is what the Reform Association believes should be the rule in a rightly constituted state. There should be religion, but no church. You have crazy logic. What does that mean? There should be religion, but no church. Maybe he's going to go on to it. There should be no religion. He's probably thinking the same thing. There should be no religion. There should be religion, but no church. What religion should there be? The Christian religion, to be sure. No idea of any other is for a moment entertained by the National Reform Party. But the Christian religion is embodied in the Christian church. Apart from the Christian church, there is no Christian religion in this world. Christ did not say, on this rock I will build my religion, but he did say, on this rock I will build my church. And in that church is his religion. The church is the body of Christ, Colossians 1:18. The members of the church are members of Christ, 1 Corinthians 6:15. Members of his body, the church, Ephesians 5:29 and 30. Out of Christ, no man can live a Christianly religious life, for he himself said, without me, you can do nothing. But to be in Christ is to be in his church, for we have proved that the church is his body in this world. We repeat, therefore, that apart from the Christian church, there is no Christian religion. This is exactly what the National Reform Party believes. And it is the Christian religion as embodied in what they call the Christian church, which that party wants this government to make the fundamental law of the nation. And that will be church and state. For the nation to unite with the Christian religion as embodied in the Christian church is to form a union with the Christian church and is therefore a union of church and state. This is like the same analogy that she showed on the board with the separation between the wall between the two, and the state can't talk to the boss, so the boss talks to the church and the church instructs the state. It's like the craziest logic, I guess you would say illogical thing. But when you create a society and raise them up to be dumbed down and don't think for themselves, the words just come out of the mouth and off the lips, and people just hear, and it goes in one ear and out the other, and nobody lets it pause inside the brain to process and think it through. It's probably a terrible way to say that, but it was kind of the visual I had in my head. If they deny our deduction from their proposition as quoted and insist that they mean literally that there can be religion, the Christian religion, but no church, then it follows that they mean that the religion of Christ can be separated from the church of Christ. Then there follows upon this the absurd conclusion that there can be a church of Christ with no religion and a religion with no representatives. But if the religion of Christ have no representatives in the world, then there's no religion of Christ in the world. If it be claimed that this is so as far as our nation is at present concerned, and that now our nation must adopt this religion, and by constitutional amendment embody in the nation's fundamental law the doctrine of God and of Christ, and enforce its observance, that will be simply for the state to create for itself the Christian religion, and so will be nothing else but a union of church and state. It is plain, therefore, that by their own proposition, whatever they may claim under it, there is literally no escape from a union of church and state. Any comments on that one? Sinners on earth cannot be truly religious without being joined to the church, but nations ought not to be joined to the church, and yet they can and must be religious. That's the Statesman again, 1886. Suppose then that every sinner in the nation, that is, every person in the nation, for all are sinners, should purpose to be truly religious. To be so, everyone must be joined to the church. Then the whole nation would be joined to the church. Suppose then that the nation should make that religion national. Would not that then be a national church? The same would be true in the case of a majority of the nation. But a national church is a state church, and a state church exists only by a union of church and state. Therefore, as this is the doctrine of national reform, it is proved that the national reform movement does contemplate nothing short of a union of church and state. So he's clearing it all up for those that haven't been paying attention to what's going on. And he's doing the same for us. If this reasoning is by the National Reform Party considered unsound, if the deduction which we make from their premises is not logical, then we verily wish that that party would show us where the line shall be drawn between the Christian religion and the Christian church. Will they show us where the line shall be drawn, which shall shut the Christian religion in the state and shut the Christian church out? They will never show it. They know just as well as we do, and we just as they, that practically they can never make any such distinction. Therefore, the success of their movement would be a union of church and state. Any comments?
Yeah, it's they can't separate it even if they wanted to, just by the sheer fact of this their desire. It's not possible to separate church and state. It's got to be church and state. It has to be.
Yeah, they just kind of rationalized over it. People that aren't paying attention from cause to effect. They're just not thinking. So further, it is a fact that what used to be the Presbyterian Church is now only the Presbyterian branch of the Christian Church. That which once was the Methodist or Baptist Church is now merely the Methodist or the Baptist branch of the Church of Christ, or the one true church. And it is a subject of constant rejoicing to them that all the differences that once made them antagonists are being accommodated, and that the one grand object of the unity of the church and its work is about to be realized. And even the Catholic Church is not excluded, but is recognized by some of the leading religious papers of our land as a part of the true church, and is recognized by the Reform Association itself as an efficient helper. That this is the position of the National Reform Party. The following proof. But these divisions are a fact, and they have been overruled so that they are not inconsistent with the unity of the church. All upon whom the name of Christ is named have their calling. The Methodists have their vocation to arouse Christian life. Presbyterians, their vocation to conserve Calvinistic principles. Calvinistic principles. And the Reformed Presbyterians, their vocation to keep unfurled the blue banner for Christ's crown and covenant. We are different divisions of Emmanuel's army. The Methodists are the charging cavalry, the Presbyterians, the fighting infantry, the Covenanters, the batteries upon the heights. We have one commander-in-chief, and under him we go forward, one united phalanx, is that phalanx?
Yes.
Against the common enemy. And when the victory is gained, the army will be won as the leader is one. And that victory comes at killing off all the infidels so that you can now have peace on earth for 1,000 years. That was, if anybody's listening that listens to this and doesn't read, that was me saying that. That's what it looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we read in the previous document.
Yes.
You have peace when you destroy all the infidels, and an infidel is anyone that does not believe in what the National Reformers believe in. If then, as they claim, all these are but branches of the one church, it necessarily requires all of them to make up the church. And if it requires all of them to make up the Christian church and the representatives of Christianity in the earth, when they all unite, as they are doing, and all work to one point of securing this religious amendment to the Constitution, and under it enforcing their united views, what is that but church and state? So they have, because this is the way it is today too, where they're spread around with their Calvinistic principles in various denominations, if I've understood correctly. Is that right? The Covenanters, the Reformed Presbyterian, that they're kind of mingled into different denominations. Is that correct?
Yes, because Calvin is not a religion, but an idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But as they insist that their movement does not tend in the least degree to a union of church and state, it makes me think of Trump, how he learned from Roy Cohen, deny, lie, never admit to anything. Just go out there and repeat the same thing over and over and over again. Eventually people are just going to go along with it and believe you. So they just continue to say that they don't believe in the least bit that this is church and state. It may be well to lay before our readers the National Reform idea of what is a union of church and state. In the Pittsburgh Convention in 1874, Professor Blanchard gave their definition of a union of church and state, and it is as follows. But union of church and state is the selection by the nation of one church, the endowment of such a church, the appointment of its officers, and oversight of its doctrines. For such a union, none of us plead. So you don't let I think that they're saying is you don't let the church tell you what to do. Is that right?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, so that's because the state can't tell the church what to do. The state can't hear the boss. speak directly to the boss. So the boss talks to the church and the church tells the state. And that's not church and state to them. Church and state to them is when the state is telling the church what to do. That's what I think I got out of that. And they say, for such a union, none of us plead to such a union, we are all opposed. Well, of course they're opposed because they want to be the boss. And the way they just spoke, what their belief of a union, church and state is the state being in charge of them. And they don't want anybody in charge of them. Let us accept this definition and see what it proves. Here it is plainly declared that the selection of the nation of one church as the recipient of its favor is the union of church and state. In that quotation that precedes this, it is just as plainly declared that the different denominations are one church. Therefore, according to their own words, when this nation selects this one church and by constitutional amendment espouses her to itself as the special object of its favor, that will be the union of church and state. Maybe you can you summarize that paragraph for me?
That's a hard one. Okay, let us accept this definition and see what it proves. Here it is plainly declared that the selection by the nation of one church, so nation is going to select one church as the recipient of its favor is the union of church and state.
So that's the state determining.
Right, so that's once that state determines one religion to be the religion of the states of the union. Yes, so in the quotation that precedes this, it is just as plainly declared that the different denominations are one church. So even though they may be different denominations, it's still one church. Therefore, so you got the church, so you got the state declaring which church is the true church, and then all the different denominations are just one church anyways. So therefore, according to their own words, when this nation selects this one church, and by constitutional amendment espouses her to itself as the special object of its favor, that will be the union of church and state. Yeah, so since there's only one religion and one church anyways, and so whatever, and the Covenanters, it's that the mindset, it's the belief. So it's like being the Calvinist. It's an idea. It's not a denomination. It's an idea. So whoever espoused that idea, it's a union of church and state.
You want to read?
Okay. Let's see. But let us examine the point which is doubtless intended in this last quotation and see whether they fare any better. In the phrase, the selection by the nation of one church, the meaning is, no doubt, that the selection by the nation, for instance, of the Methodist or the Baptist or the Reformed Presbyterian Church as the object of its favor would be the union of church and state, because it doesn't matter. But if this would be the union of church and state, how is it that the other would not be? If the selection by the nation of one church is union of church and state, we should like to know how the difficulty is in the least relieved by the selection of a dozen or 50 as one. will someone of the National Reform advocates point out the distinction and draw the line of demarcation? So there is no line of demarcation. That's what I'm understanding,
Yeah.
because he's asking someone to draw the line of demarcation, and because there isn't any. Because all these religions are one mind, one church, whether they be Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterians, doesn't matter. Once more, in one of the foregoing quotations from the statesmen, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, and the Reformed Presbyterians are said to be but different divisions of Emmanuel's army. The Methodists, the cavalry, the Presbyterians, the infantry, and the Reformed Presbyterians, the artillery, in one united phalanx, in one army. Now, in the Declaration of Independence, our fathers charged that the King of Great Britain had affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. What a great pity it is that George III did not have for his advisors some of these national reform statesmen. If he only could have had these, he could have shown to a candid world that this change of his American charge, if he only could have had these, he could have shown to a candid world that this charge of his American colonies was altogether false and foreign to the subject of their grievances. With the reasoning of the national reformers, he could have projected into the controversy this magnificent and most conclusive disclaimer. Is he being facetious here?
Say that again.
Is he being facetious?
He reads that, he writes that way a lot with sarcasm.
Yeah, it seems a little sarcastic here. With the reasoning of the national reformers, he could have. So he's talking about George III. If he had the backing of the national reformers or the ideas of national reformers, he could have projected into the controversy this magnificent and most conclusive disclaimer.
And now he's going to give that. He's going to give that.
Yeah, the disclaimer.
Conclusive disclaimer.
Okay. We reaffirm that the establishment of our military forces in America, instead of tending in the least degree toward making the military superior to the civil power, will afford the fullest security against such a corrupting establishment and form the strongest safeguard of the liberties of all citizens. But what we mean by making the military superior to the civil power is a selection by the king of one division of the army, the artillery, for instance, and making that the depository and the expositor of the king's will. For such a superiority, no one pleads. To such a superiority, all of us are opposed. For the king thus to select and favor one division of the army would indeed be to make the military superior to the civil power. But for him to so select the whole army together, cavalry, infantry, and artillery, would not tend in the least degree to make the military superior to the civil power.
Some of this I definitely have to go over again. Because he does, we should probably go ahead, we can pause here. Because I think I'd like to, if we could, when we come back on this one again, pick up on this page altogether again.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yes.
because this one was kind of complicated to follow. But what we do know is that they have a funky idea of church and state, or they just live in a different reality. That what they're doing is not church and state, because they clearly claim it's not church and state, and they define that church and state to them is when the state is the boss over the church. And the state's not the one that calls the church and says who the church is of the nation. The church is the one that says who the church of the nation is. Is that what I've understood here?
Yeah, so they don't think it's church and state because it's not state over church.
Yeah.
So it's church over state. And I think, this is just what I think, is that the Covenanters, these Reform Association, probably are thinking that, yes, they communicate with God and we will tell the state what God says, but the state has the power either to go along with what God says or they don't. I think this is what they're thinking. So therefore, this is really not church and state, because the state has its own thoughts and laws and power to decline what the church or God in this matter has to say, and they'll just not go along with it. I think this is their idea of why they don't think it's a church and state relationship, but which is false, because who doesn't want to do what God says to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another interesting one. That last one, I'm gonna share that in the, I don't know if I did already. I'm gonna share that in the teacher group. That's just amazing to hear direct quotes from them, from their own mouths. It's incredible. Well, any other comments or thoughts or questions? David, how about you? Everybody's muted.
Fading here.
Yeah. You got the documents that I sent to you the other day as well, too, right?
Yeah, I started going through the first one of that. That's excellent.
Yeah, I did the Nature of Man one, and yeah, excellent. Good material.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, they're Aaron's. Yeah, thank him. So, well, David, would you like to close us in prayer?
Okay. Our loving Father in heaven, we thank you so much, Lord, for another day of life, Lord. We thank you, Lord, for this reading. It's showing us really what's going on, Lord, and it's repeating history. And we need to be wide awake, Lord. Even though other things are falling apart, Lord, our mission is clear. We're just looking over to you to carry us through these things, Lord. So help us as we learn these things to remember them and settle them in our hearts, Lord. We thank you, Lord, for the work of Elaine to bring this about, Lord, and the people who've come tonight, Lord. Ask a blessing on them and their homes, Lord. So teach us to be Christians, Lord, real Christians, that we might reflect you and to this dying world. Help us all to rest well tonight. And I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good
Night.
night, everybody.
Good night.
We'll be back on
Good
Wednesday.
night.